If you are honest with yourself, there is a good chance you have looked at a rosary and thought, "This looks boring." And you wouldn't be alone. To the modern mind, wired for dopamine hits and 10-second videos, the idea of sitting in a room, fingering beads, and muttering the exact same 50 words over and over again feels like torture. It feels like the definition of insanity. It feels like a spiritual treadmill where you run and run but get absolutely nowhere. But here is the catch. What if I told you that you have been looking at this ancient tool completely backwards? What if the boredom isn't a bug, but a feature? What if that repetitive, rhythmic chanting is actually a sophisticated psychological technology designed to hack your brain, lower your cortisol, and unlock a state of deep flow that modern biohackers are spending thousands of dollars to achieve? Today, we are not just talking about prayer. We are talking about the single most misunderstood weapon in the spiritual arsenal. We are going to deconstruct the rosary. We are going to drag it out of the dusty history books and put it under a microscope to show you the science, the psychology, and the raw history that proves this is anything but mindless. Stick around, because by the end of this deep dive, you are going to realize that if you think the rosary is just repetition, you are praying it wrong. To understand the sheer genius of this design, we have to leave the modern world behind. We need to rewind the clock over 1,600 years, leaving the noise of the city for the absolute crushing silence of the Egyptian desert in the 3rd and 4th century. This was the era of the desert fathers and mothers, radical Christian hermits who walked away from society to fight their demons in the sand. Their lives were dedicated to one thing: unceasing prayer. Their manual was the Book of Psalms, 150 ancient poems of David. They would recite the entire Psalter, all 150 psalms every single day. It was a rhythm of life. It was the heartbeat of the desert. But there was a massive problem. As Christianity exploded across the world, it reached the common people, the illiterate farmers, the soldiers, the blacksmiths, the mothers working from dawn to dusk. These people couldn't read. Books were luxury items, worth a year's wages. So how could a peasant in a mud hut join the spiritual rhythm of a monk in the desert? The solution was a stroke of brilliant adaptation. The church realized they needed a substitute. Instead of reading 150 psalms, the people began to recite 150 Our Fathers. To keep count, they didn't have apps or clickers. They used what the earth gave them. They filled small leather pouches with 150 pebbles, dropping one for each prayer. Later, they tied knots in simple wool ropes. This wasn't just a tool. It was the poor man's breviary. It was a way to democratize holiness, ensuring that the illiterate peasant was praying with the exact same intensity as the learned bishop. Slowly, over centuries, the prayer evolved. After the Council of Ephesus in 431 declared Mary the God-bearer, the Hail Mary began to weave its way into this rhythm. But the real game changer, the moment the Rosary became the powerhouse we know today, didn't happen until the 1400s. Enter Dominic of Prussia, a Carthusian monk with a revolutionary idea. He saw that people were saying the words, but their minds were wandering. They were zoning out. So he proposed a Life of Jesus Rosary. He attached a specific scene from the Gospel to each prayer. Suddenly, the beads weren't just counters, they were movie frames. This was the missing link. It transformed the Rosary from a vocal exercise into a mental immersion. It became a way to walk through the biography of Jesus, using the rhythm of the voice to keep the mind focused on the story. This structure was finally codified by Pope St. Pius V in 1569, locking in the 15-decade structure that would sustain the Church for half a millennium. Now we have to address the elephant in the room, the criticism. You have heard it. Maybe you have said it. Matthew 6:7. Jesus says, "Do not use vain repetitions as the heathens do." It seems like an open and shut case, right? But look closer at that word. Vain, empty, meaningless. Jesus wasn't condemning repetition, he was condemning mindlessness. Think about it. When you are terrified, you might repeat, "Oh God, help me, oh God, help me." Is that vain? No, that is desperate. When a husband tells his wife, "I love you," every single morning for 50 years, is that vain repetition, or is it the reinforcing rhythm of a relationship? The brilliance of the Rosary lies in how it occupies your body to free your soul. It recognizes that we are fidgety creatures. We need to do something with our hands. We need to say something with our lips. The vocal prayers, the Hail Marys, are not the primary focus. They are the background music. They are the metronome. When you drive a car, your hands and feet are performing complex, repetitive motions, steering, braking, accelerating, almost on autopilot. This physical repetition frees your mind to think, to observe, to navigate. The Rosary works exactly the same way. The beads keep your hands busy. The chant keeps your lips busy. And because your body is occupied, your mind is finally free to step into the scene. And what a scene it is. Pope St. John Paul II called the Rosary a compendium of the gospel. And he wasn't exaggerating. It is a spiritual photo album. When you enter the joyful mysteries, you aren't just thinking about the Incarnation. You are standing in the dusty room in Nazareth, waiting for Mary to say, yes. When you enter the sorrowful mysteries, you are no longer in your living room. You are kneeling in the Garden of Gethsemane, hearing the crunch of the soldiers' boots. You are feeling the weight of the cross on the road to Calvary. The glorious mysteries pull you into the blinding light of the resurrection. And thanks to St. John Paul II's edition of the Luminous Mysteries in 2002, we now walk through the public ministry of Jesus. The wedding at Cana, the Transfiguration, the first Eucharist. You are watching the water turn to wine. You are seeing the bread break. But if the theology doesn't convince you, the science might. For years, skeptics dismissed the peace of the Rosary as a placebo effect. But modern neuroscience is starting to catch up with ancient wisdom. A groundbreaking international study published in the Journal of Religion and Health threw a grenade into the assumption that religious people are just repressing their emotions. Researchers in Italy, Poland, and Spain surveyed hundreds of people and found a direct, hard-line correlation. Regular Rosary prayer leads to significantly lower levels of depression and spiritual anxiety. But why? What is happening in the brain? It turns out the boring repetition is a physiological master switch. When you recite the Rosary, you naturally fall into a rhythmic breathing pattern. A study in the British Medical Journal discovered that reciting the Latin Ave Maria slows the breathing to approximately 6 breaths per minute. This is not a random number. 6 breaths per minute is the physiological sweet spot that synchronizes your heart rate variability with your respiration. It stimulates the vagus nerve, which tells your brain to kill the stress response and activate the parasympathetic nervous system. It literally forces your body to calm down. It lowers your blood pressure. It tells your fight-or-flight response to stand down. The study explicitly compared the Rosary to modern mindfulness meditation and found that it offers all the same mental health benefits: clarity, emotional regulation, stress reduction, but with an added layer. Because while mindfulness often asks you to empty your mind or focus on your breath, the Rosary asks you to fill your mind with a person: Jesus Christ. It combines the physiological benefits of meditation with the psychological benefits of relationship and empathy. The researchers found that people who prayed the Rosary weren't isolated introverts. They actually displayed higher levels of empathy for others. By constantly meditating on a God who suffers and loves, they became more compassionate humans. So, where does this leave us? We have looked at the history, the theology, and the cold, hard science. But information means nothing without action. The Rosary was never meant to be studied. It was meant to be wielded. The saints didn't call it a necklace. They called it a weapon. Padre Pio called it his weapon. In a world that is constantly trying to fracture your attention, steal your peace, and monetize your anxiety, the Rosary is an act of rebellion. It is a sword that cuts through the noise. It creates a portable sanctuary that you can carry in your pocket. You don't need to be a monk. You don't need a theology degree. You don't even need the beads. You have 10 fingers. Here is my challenge to you. Do not commit to an hour. Do not commit to the whole 15 decades. Just try the experiment. Tonight, find a quiet corner. Pick one mystery. Maybe it's the Nativity. Close your eyes and build that scene in your mind. Smell the hay, feel the cold air, then start the rhythm. 1 Our Father, 10 Hail Marys, 1 Glory Be. Let the repetition be the waves that carry you out to the deep water. If your mind wanders, gently bring it back to the image. Just do it once. Step out of the noise and into the rhythm. Because the Rosary is not just repetition, it is the heartbeat of a 2,000-year-old relationship, and it is waiting for you to join in.